The Dreadwolf Take You by Patrick Weeks. The building sat hunched near the docks of Hunterville, as though hoping not to be noticed. A hornless canary stood at the door, dressed in a dark suit and carrying a mahogany walking stick whose head was a dragon skull carved from lizard. The cut of his clothes and the scars of his hands sent a clear warning that sailors looking for a cheap drink should look elsewhere. A sign over the door had no picture, but read simply, "The Tea House." Inside the tea house was a tiny lit and conspicuously quiet. It was a place where a hood pulled up could hide a face, where whispers were worth more than gold. Candlelight flickered in smoked glass lamps, shedding just enough light for a keen-eyed servant to find their way across the thick stained planks that lined the floor. There was no common tables, merely a bar and a number of wide booths, each blocked off from the room by heavy velvet curtains, woven through with lyrium enchanted to prevent any sound from escaping the booth. The elf currently known as Charter nodded to the canary doorman as she stepped inside. He stared down at her, quick movements of his eyes showing that he saw at least some of the daggers hidden beneath her simply cloak and traveling clothes. "I hope you are here for peaceful purposes," he said. His accent was almost gone, but she caught the traces of an old canary bleeding through. A deserter, then likely from the canary, had occupied part of Kirkwall years back. "As do I," Carter said. The doorman narrowed his eyes slightly but made no move to take her weapons. The tea house was for the discreet, not the foolish, and it would be the height of foolishness to attend even a peaceful meeting without options if something went wrong. "I am meeting someone." She let a little bit of Kirkwall into her voice, and the doorman hit a tiny flinch. Definitely from the city's occupation, and the memories weren't pleasant. "Sage is available at the bar to assist you in finding your party," the doorman said, with a polite smile. "Have a pleasant evening." Carter nodded to him and stepped inside. She paused to blink in the dim light and saw a servant, a middle-aged human woman in a gown of ringed velvet so dark it seemed to eat what little light there was. The woman held a tray of drinks, one black tea, one herbal, one spiced wine, and she waited for a moment to see if Charter was pass. I would pass. Charter waved her forward, still blinking. Late or not, she would not move where she could not see. The servant nodded and stepped to one of the curtains booths, drawing it back. For a moment sound came through, and she caught voices, one dwarven with a Carter accent, and one that sounded Ravani. The doorman coughed politely behind her, and Charter nodded and made her way to the bar, aware of the eyes on her back. The man behind the bar, Sage, wore the same dark outfit as the doorman. He was a dwarf, and agent from the agent from the look of it. Skin like tanned leather pulled over bones tightly enough for the tendons to stand out of his forearms. A former daggerman, Charter guessed. He smiled at Charter's approach, the wrinkles around his eyes folding like a collapsed Elysian fan. How may we help you this evening, my dear? He asked. His accent was Nevaran, and his smile surprisingly genuine. I came to meet friends, she said. A gauche party of 5. Of course, the upstairs room is reserved for you, said gestures to the glass behind him. The others have already arrived. May I take your order? She, she'd been on the road for a week and badly wanted a glass of wine, but she wanted a warm fireplace and a woman named Tessa in her arms, too, and neither of those would be good ideas right now or now either. Underfelds mint loose leaf if you have any. Sage nodded. And do I recall correctly that it was two sugars? That had been 10 years and several names ago. She smiled despite herself. You do, thank you. Sage gestured to the staircase, which was lit more brightly. No one coming to a secret rendezvous wanted to make a bad impression by tripping on the stairs in the dark. She nodded and headed up, her footsteps quiet as she turned at the landing, then headed up farther. The top floor was blocked by another of the black curtains that blocked the sound, and when she pushed it aside, she saw one large room. The lamps were dim, and the walls bare of both windows and any painting where a peephole might have been concealed, but a fireplace against the wall cracked merely, and seated around the fire, in comfortable overstuffed chairs, were 4 figures. A dwarf, early middle age, his hair and beard black as the leather he wore, his boots and gloves stitched with lyrium runes, and the thin blade at his waist gleaming in its woven hide scabbard. A big cup of coffee sat mostly empty before him, and his eyes were sharp as he watched her come in. The Carter assassin. A slender man wearing bright silks whose irresistance hues more complemented by an opal inplate, full face mask done to look like dragon's scales, with curly blonde locks that hung about his shoulders. A teacup sat at the table in front of him. A few drops still left in the silver spoon, resting on the saucer. The Orlesian bard. A pale woman in dark robes of a Nevaran mage, frowning with evident disapproval, her staff sitting at rest by her chair, but still cracking with faint magic around the amethyst crystal at the head, gripped by silver figures whose mouths hung open in agony or ecstasy. Charter Kuntal. She cradled a glass of mulled wine, while a silver staring stick twirled in the glass of its own accord. The Mortalitasi, a figure covered head to toe in dark robes of Virentium samite, with a thin mesh dropping down to cover the hood. The dark robes were trimmed in a pattern Charter had never seen, twisting shapes that curled to points in the places that made her eyes hurt. A cup of A cup of what looked like dark red wine sat before the figure, untouched by leather-gloved hands, but she caught a faint whiff of the ocean from his robes, and something beyond the ocean, the ex, executor. They all turned to look at her as she came in. She made no effort to hide her steps. Stealth might be taken as rudeness, but the sound was still muffled, and the door felt slightly springy beneath her feet. A layer of cork under the under the floorboards for additional soundproofing. Then, "You're late," the assassin snapped. "I've been stuck listening to the peacock and the death mage and whatever he is." He gestures at the executor. "She's perfectly on time," the Mortalitasi said with a sniff. "It is not as though you were enjoyable to talk to yourself, monsieur," the bard said, his Orlesian accent. "It is not as though you were enjoyable to talk to yourself, monsieur," the bard said, his Orlesian accent curling like smoke around the words. "Enough!" The voice that came from the executor could have been male or female, young or old. It was less a voice than the idea of a voice rendered acceptably, but no more. "We came because we possess a short interest in the wolf." "The Inquisition's wolf," the assassin smirked. "Remember, he worked with them for a year, with none of them the wiser. Imagine that, overlooking the god in your midst." "How's that feel?" he asked, looking at Charda. She allowed irritation to show with a little grimace as she sat down, making the Carter agent feel like he had scored a point might get him to share more information of his own. "He is not a god, as he himself says. He merely is a very old, very powerful elf mage." Or possibly meant a very young mage, the bard suggested. "He could be a simple elf who stumbled onto old magic. Or he could be a demon impersonating an elf," the Mortalitas said, sipping her wine. Or he could be a demon impersonating an elf," the Mortalitasi said, sipping her wine. What he is, does not concern us," the executor said, the words neutral, but carrying a weight that made the wine in its cup ripple. "Re across the ocean, care only for his goals and means of accomplishing them. According to what he told the Inquisitor, according to what he told the Inquisitor," Charter said, shifting in her seat and nothing with hidden pleasure how they paused at her words. "He wishes to restore the empire of the ancient elves, and he has made it clear that doing so will cause massive destruction to our world." "Especially Tevinter," the Mortalitasi said with a sneer, "since most of it is built over where the ancient elves who lived." She looked around the room. She looked around the room curiously. "You said that this would be a meeting of the best spies on the continent. Where are the Tevinter Sikari and the Ben Hathrath and the Ben Hathrath the executor added. "Do the Conari fear to speak with us?" "Tevinter's intelligence network declined to answer our request," Charter said. Tevinter's intelligent network declined to answer our request, Chada said. As did the Ben Hasrath. As did the Ben Hasrath. The latter is especially disappointing. They had more knowledge of Solar's movements than anyone else. They also tried to wipe out most of the southern governments in a surprise attack, the assassin said, and then invaded when that failed. He smiled tightly and took a sip of his coffee. I'd be careful trusting anything they say. Carter nodded, and as though the Carter dwarf had said something that wasn't obvious to everyone in the room. Then let out a long breath. Beyond that, the Inquisition knows little about what Solus intends. Much of his research involves the veil that separates our world from the world of the spirits. He claimed to have created, and he asked the Inquisition to help activating artifacts to strengthen the veil. That seems a possible place to start. It was weak, which Carter knew. She let that weakness creep into her voice as she said it. The little hitch of someone shone out of their depth. The executor was motionless. The Elysian merely stirred his tea, and the Mortalitazi rolled his eyes. But the Carter assassin bit as she'd hoped he would. I'm only here because Viscount Tethras called in a few favors, he said, smiling broadly. But I didn't expect to be best informed person in the room. You don't even know what he wants, and I can tell you that, Chada said back, clenching her teeth. The assassin clearly enjoyed her frustration, and with a little push, he would tell her everything. We know what he wants, she said hotly. He wishes to end. Not his goal, the assassin waved away and then finished his coffee. His target, the Carter, might not be much for magic, but pay attention and you might learn a trick or two. The Assassin's Tale. So, red lyrium. At first we thought it was just a new ore of the stone, more magic per ounce, little more of a bite to it. When Bartrand went crazy after discovering red lyrium, we thought it was just, him going crazy. Same for Meredith, when she nearly destroyed Kirkwall. The Templars are always two missed meals from madness. Take it from the folks who sell them their lyrium. Then word got around. One of our best smiths has been studying red lyrium, and she says the blasted stuff is tainted by the blight. A few families might have tried to keep smuggling it after that, but we shut that down. The Carter believes in business. Blight is bad for business. Another thing that's bad for business is competition. So when Viscount Tethras kept the quarantine in Kirkwall, where Meredith caused so much damage with her lyrium sword, and then turned into a blasted statue herself, the Carter approved. Anybody got ideas about sneaking and breaking off a piece of old Mary the Mad for themselves? We showed them the error of their ways. You got it? So when this Dalish elf comes around asking, can someone get the lyrium idol out of what's left of the statue, our first thought was to send him back to his to his clan with a few new tattoos carved into his face, if you know what I mean. Plus the idol's gone. Everyone knows Mary the Mad forged forged that old idol into her sword, and then the sword exploded. But the elf keeps at but the elf keeps at it. He's learned it from the dream. Some old legend of his people says the idol in her and is in her body. And if he gets it out, he can free his old he can free his gods or something like that. Honestly, the elf gods always bored the crap out of me. No offense, Charter. At least the human's maker has the good sense to sort of and leave us alone. We are about to kill him, not because we are cruel, you understand, but anybody who is that determined to dig around in a statue of in a statue of lyrium needs to be put down before before they get a bunch of people hurt. And then the elf pulls out a potion and says it will soften the raw lyrium and weaken its magic for a bit so we can get to the idol inside safely. We pour a little of that potion on the lyrium for a laugh. And damned if it doesn't work, just like he says. Crazy or not, the elf knows something. And he promises us the statue's weight in gold. Plus, he will teach us to make that potion, which is a very profitable possibility. So we decide that safest thing for us to do is help the elf. Help the help, help, help the elf out so that he doesn't get hurt trying to do it himself. None, none of this goes to your divine Victoria Charter. I don't even know. I don't even know. I don't even know how much of an inquisition you still have these days. But this is sharing in good faith. And if I get guards banging on my door about something that wasn't supposed to leave this room, the charter will be very unhappy. You hear me? Just making sure. Anyway, we sneak into the Crontide Square, where Mary the Mad is keeping watch forever, climbing over the berries you've set up quite and quick. It takes a little bribery and a little moving, quite like, and maybe a few of Kirkwill's finest. Should have taken the hint and gone for a walk. But they got a bad case of squabbles and had to go for a swim instead. But what matters is we got this to the statue. It was creepy, I tell you that. The whole square stank of magic thick enough to raise the hair on your arms. And as you were were moving through the shadows, I'd swear on my mother's urn, I'd heard music in the wind, like some old song. I heard it as a kid, but can't quite remember. A couple of us fell over right there, shaking and whispering, but most of us keep our heads on straight, and we get to the statue. It doesn't really look human anymore. It doesn't look like much of anything, other than a twisted wan lyrium that just grew out of the ground in a weird place. Some of the lyrium is dark, some of it's glowing. The song in my head is getting louder, and another of my Carter brothers runs off screaming, the idiot. Me, I'm just glad the statue doesn't look much like Meredith anymore, because digging something out of a dead woman's chest isn't something decent people do. Our alchemist uses the potion on old Mary the Mad, pouring it right on her heart, just like the elf said. And old Mary opens up like a snowman, but boiling water tossed on it, and damned if it isn't there in the middle of her chest. That little idol Barton brought back from the deep roads. It's not much to look at. A couple hugging, too thin to be dwarfs, but it's sitting there, glowing softly like a ruby lit by the grace of the maker himself. I've got the best gloves, genuine wyvern leather, and I reach in, scoop aside and the raw lyrium like it was mud in a rainstorm, and pry out the idol. Its behavior than you, it's heavier than you think. Lyrium's heavier than you think too. But this was heavy even for that. When I hefted it in my hand, it was like it wanted to keep moving, like it was liquid inside. I don't know. Anyway, we get it into the chest, double shielded, safe enough that you could sleep with it under your pillow at night. And the song shuts off all at once. We get out of the square and back to the safe house, where the elf is waiting. But but that's when the trouble hits. After Kirkwall went boom, a lot of the Templars went rogue. They kept buying lyrium from us, but they are all but bandits. Tell you the truth, we kept them reined in by threatening not to supply them unless they kept trouble to a minimum. At our safe house, these former Templars find us. One of the guards we bribed must have talked, I suppose, because they knew what we had and they wanted it. A piece of old Mary the Mad to keep them for themselves. They have outnumbered on account of the man we lost to that song in our heads. So we go inside to negotiate the elf come to negotiate. The elf comes out and tries to fight, and they rough him up some, and he is on the ground sleeping with a lump on his head in short order. The leader of the former Templars says that he wants the potion that changes lyrium, and he can't give what we don't have, and he is not happy to see that the person who doesn't know how to make that potion is lying out cold on the ground. So he ties up the elf and says that he will wait. He takes the chest, and not long enough after, another man comes by, Tevinter by his clothes, and I heard the Templars say something about House Quintara, and he gives them a big bag of gold and takes the idol. Now the Templars are waiting for the elf to wake up, and it's almost morning, so some of them go to sleep, while the others keep watch. Some of my boys are doing the same, and the Templar leader and I are sitting and they're drinking coffee, trying to figure out how we are going to settle this without anybody else ending up dead. They drink much coffee. That's when the sleepers start twitching, all of them at once, backs twisted like they've having a fit. With the Templars, I think it's a bad dream, but it's happening to my boys too. And you all know dwarves don't dream. Whatever it is, it has them shaking and seizing, and then it all goes still, and everyone who was asleep is dead, with blood pouring from their ears. And let me tell you, Templars don't like anything that looks like demons killing their boys at all. So Templars leader is up with his blade out, and I'm doing the same. Because what kind of magic does he think the Carter uses exactly? And also, if it were us using it, Why would I kill my own? That's when arrows come through the window and leave the Templar pinned to the wall. Everyone who was awake was on their feet, and the arrows hit all of them except me, because I didn't get my job by not knowing when to dive for cover. The Templars are down. My boys are down, and I hear footsteps coming. So I make my way to the sleeping elf, because I figure he tries to, uh, he's tied to his somehow. And I dealt with him proper and honest, so maybe if this is his people, he will vouch for me. He's already dead. Bad luck for him. A stray arrow caught him in the throat. I smear his blood by my ears and twist up on the floor in my best imitation of a corpse. They come in the moment later, elves, but not any elves. Not any elves I ever seen. No crab on their face like the Dalish, and they don't have that little hunch a city elf has. Hoping you don't notice them. They got fancy armor and bows out. Um, bows on, and they case the room like professionals. One of them says that the idol must have been moved, and his is your accent is your normal Pharrell and not like the Dalish, who always sound like they are talking through a mouthful of toffee. Um, he sees the dread elf. He sees he sees the dead elf on the ground and swears. Must have been embarrassed that his own arrow killed the boy he was supposed to rescue. The other one leans down by the body and says, "The Dreadwolf guide your soul to peace, brother." And his accent does sound Dalish, only more formal, like he's reading a poem, even when he's not. And then the elves walk out of, or walk out of there without another word. So that's what happened. My word to your maker, the Dreadwolf wants that idol, and he is not afraid to get his hands bloody to get it. I pity House Kirintara, if he ever finds them, and I hope none of them are deep sleepers. The assassin sat back as the thick black curtain parted and everyone turned to watch the servant in Chartersty. And everyone turned to watch the servant bring in Chartersty. "Thank you," she said, as the woman set the cup and saucer on the table. Will there be anything else?" the servant asked, looking around the room. "No, merci. No, merci. I will have another Antivian." The assassin held out of his coffee cup, and the servant took it and left. When she was gone, the assassin glared at the room. "Anyone else ready to share?" A second cup of coffee, and a killer who came in dreams or sleep, since dwarfs did not dream. The Carter assassin was afraid. "Interesting to see both Dalish and city elves working with this thing," the mortality grimaced. And then her eyes... Interesting to see both Dalish and city elves working with this thing, the mortality grimaced. And then her eyes snapped down to her staring stick, still moving of its own accord in her wine glass. I see specks at the bottom, Wisp." Her voice held a warning, and the staring stick jerked and moving faster. "The Templars," the bard said. "How did they know your safe house, monsieur?" The assassin grimaced. "Guess it wasn't to save us after all. Haven't used it since. I will tell you that for free. House Queen Tara fell with the city of Ventus, the executor said, shifting under the cove's robe. The Conari maid possesses the wolf's idol. I do not believe so, Charter smiled. I had agent involved with House Quintara before it fell, or more accordingly while it fell, but that was more information than the room needed. The idol was sold to trade it to the Daenerys family. So you already knew that? The assassin asked, scrolling. And now we know that the Dreadwolf has agents working for him. And now, and now we know that the Dreadwolf has agents working for him. The bard added, his mask glittering in firelight as he tossed back his golden locks, and that he has the power to kill those who oppose him as they sleep. Useful information. The hair toss was effective, but a little clumsy. He normally styled his hair differently. He has no hair. And another point in favor of this so-called god being a demon, the Mortalitas added, or a poison, or a poisoneer. The crows have odorless poisons, heavier than the air. They steal the breath from sleepers while leaving those seated or standing unharmed. I know potions. The assassin growled, leaning forward and glaring at the cloaked executor. I know magic, and I know which killed my boys. This does not help us eliminate the wolf. You might as well suggest we throw a rock at him. The executor turned. The field is black underneath, the hood suddenly looming as it centered on the assassin. You stink of lies and fear. The assassin leaned in, his blade already halfway from its sheath, and the bard was suddenly between them, one hand raised before the assassin, the other resting gently to the executor's glove. Please, Miss Amis. Please, Amis. I know. If we argue, none of us will learn. If we argue, none of us will learn what we came to find. Charter gave the bard credit. She wouldn't have touched the executor herself unless she'd had a weapon drawn. But then, given the reputation of Elysian bards, it was likely that he had a weapon closer than she thought. His hands were ungloved, his fingers long and pale. The fleshy rings had no tan lines around them, so they were costuming not normally part of his outfit. I believe the dwarf, the Mortalitasi said, and I have information that supports it. I believe I know where the idol went after it left House Quintara. The last was directed to her steering stick. Stop! The last was directed to her steering stick, which abruptly went still in her cup. She removed it and gently eased it into a hidden pocket of her staff, just below the amethyst crystal gripped by the silver figures. The Mortalitasi's tale. In Tevinter, the mages made the greatest possible mistake. They chose to rule. In doing so, they shackled themselves to dusk and appointments, using their waking hours to command men when they could have been commanding the magical forces that underline the very fabric of this world. In Nevara the king rules, and the common people are happy, or at least as happy as common people ever get. And the mages, the mortalitasi, we rule the king. With a small investment of time, we command one man, and that man commands the others. And beyond that, we need not concern ourselves with them. We perform rituals. The specifics need to concern you. Only a mage would truly understand, and none of you are mages, unless the executor wishes to correct me.